today, this image which I find really disturbing. It felt like it was lifted from a dystopian drama. The Iranian state television hit by an Israeli airstrike during a live broadcast. A news anchor kept speaking as the studio around her began to disintegrate. Debris fell, screens shattered, and for a moment the signal broke, and then unnervingly it resumed, and the voice of the state, battered but still speaking, declared, "We are standing until the end." We often talk of media battles as metaphors. On this occasion, the metaphor collapsed into the literal. It was the war, televised, and the footage is grotesque in its clarity. Fluorescent lights flicker, a presenter flinches, then flees. Look at this.
Evet. Ve bir daha izleyelim. Canlı yayında meslektaşımız
And around her is chaos. And as the scene, this is from Turkish TV. As the scene, it belongs in a cinematic reckoning of authoritarianism, but it unfolds in real time. Journalists working until the very last moment were, according to Iranian reports, injured. Bloodstained papers paraded on camera, offered as proof of martyrdom. This perversion of Islam by Ayatollah Khomeini, who turned suicide into martyrdom, shaheed. It's just, suicide is wrong. Suicide is something that is twice condemned in the Quran itself, and yet Ayatollah Khomeini, almost to demonstrate the evil of his reign, turns it into something to celebrate. And of course it's condemned in the hadiths. It's better for that man never to have lived. I think today we have a more reasonable and understandable approach to suicide in the West, where we recognise this is about great trouble, great mental anguish, and but that isn't what is in the Quran. The Quran is clear, and Ayatollah Khomeini produced this extraordinary perversion of doctrine, forcing people, young people, like Hussein, the fellow who blew himself up, the first martyr, the first suicide victim, forcing young people particularly to sacrifice themselves for the state, for him. And but even without Tehran's propaganda flourish, the horror stands. I think an airstrike on a newsroom mid-transmission in a building employing thousands in the middle of a dense civilian district. And the Israeli Defense Forces later claimed the site was being used by the Iranian military under the guise of civilian activity, but this doesn't neutralize the deeper unease. And the laws of war require proportionality, not just warning. You don't civilize a strike by dropping leaflets or making phone calls before it detonates. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, called the building a military communication center, claiming it was used by operations, for operations by the Iranian armed forces. And perhaps it was, but even so, at the moment of the strike, captured live on television, captured not military triumph, but moral collapse. And there are rules in law. They're imperfect, but they exist, and the Geneva Conventions prohibit attacks on civilian infrastructures unless they're being used for active military purposes. And even then, the response must be proportionate, discriminate, and crucially, it must avoid unnecessary harm to civilians. That's not what we saw on the TV. And striking a media building during a live broadcast is not proportionate. It's a calculated act of dominance, a theatre of obliteration designed to send a message, not just to Tehran, but to every journalist, every viewer, every politician watching. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking on American television, doubled down. He spoke of targeting Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. It's not going to escalate the conflict, he said. It's going to end it. This, I suspect, is a dangerously naive assertion. One doesn't end a storm by shooting lightning bolts into the clouds. When Netanyahu calls an act in the service of mankind, which is demonstrably an act of provocation, which is demonstrably an act that defies the Geneva Conventions, to those of us looking from London, Berlin, Toronto, this looks like the murder of nuance. Iran's regime is deeply problematic. It suppresses its people, it funds proxies, it fans flames, but striking its state broadcaster in real time, that creates martyrs, not peace. And it trades deterrence for spectacle. And even the West, often tacitly supportive of Israeli security operations, is struggling to frame this as something that is acceptable. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy said it plainly in the Commons, this is not our strike. And Britain urges de-escalation, and rightly so, because however strategic the target, the image of journalists cut down mid-broadcast is unpalatable to any liberal democracy with a memory of war, fascism and press suppression. We also need to reflect on the hypocrisy. Israel has long refused to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's an undeclared nuclear arsenal holder, estimated at around 90 warheads that it's got. Its strikes are said to be preventing Iran from gaining nuclear weapons, and yet it retains its own with strategic silence. This asymmetry undermines Israel's moral authority, especially when delivering deadly messages through burning newsrooms. And it can't turn around and say, oh yeah, but I'm the most civilized nation around, when it's bombing Gaza to bits. This is not a defense of Iran's regime or its propaganda machine. I detest both. It's a defense of boundaries, of civilians, of the principle that wars must have limits. And once you attack a studio, you attack more than a building. You attack the notion that there's any safe space left. And the blood-stained news script held up by IRIB's director, Peyman Jebeli, who declared, we are standing until the end. This is not martyrdom. This is resilience, and yet it was broadcast not by choice but by force, and Israel may have scored a tactical win, but strategically it's broadcast its own brutality, and the world is watching. Whatever tacit support Israel may enjoy from some Western powers, this strike should not be silently condoned. It must be qualified. Even more, it must be condemned, I think. A democracy does not strengthen itself by destroying the airwaves of its enemies live on television. That is not defence. That is desecration of free speech. Even if that free speech is perverted, it's not the job of the neighbouring of a neighbouring power to throw bombs at the media station. It's the job of the neighbouring power to put out an alternative version. That's what, incidentally, we should be doing in Russia. We should be putting out alternative versions. Destroying the airwaves of its enemies live on television. The line between military necessity and visual horror must not be allowed to blur. And we need to hold that line.